If I was tracking success rates based on abstinence, he would have been a negative because he relapsed soon after coming out of the program. But in my opinion, that is 100% a success story. All right, folks, welcome to Beyond Sobriety. This is show 2 of our new format through a podcast. And today's show is going to be centered on the topic of success when it comes to how that word is used within substance abuse treatment. Obviously having to answer that question often, it is the number one question that loved ones, family, parents ask when they are inquiring about sending a loved one to Freedom Farm or Carries Home for Women, which is, what is your success rate? And people always ask that, and I think that it's easy to say that they have an expectation of what that word means, which is success, meaning that we're gonna send our loved one there, and when they come out, they won't have those problems anymore. They won't use substances anymore or abuse them. And I think the word is much more complicated, and that's what the basis of this show is today, that we really need to talk about it. And I want to try to give a little commentary how it's used to promote success rates at other programs, and how we can, if you find yourself hearing success rates, maybe some questions you need to ask, if you're able to, about it and how they got those numbers. So
today we're talking about success and what it looks like in our program, but also just what it kind of looks like industry-wide, because obviously there's a lot of, success. Basically, one of the things that we want to get across is that you need to talk when you're looking for treatment. You need to be aware that every facility you talk to is going to measure success differently. And so I've got statistics from the Betty Ford Clinic. I've got a national study that they did. You're going to hear Betty Ford says anywhere from 85 to 95% success rate for their people, and how they measure success is those people are abstinent when they call them 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months after the people leave the program. Those people are still abstinent. They're self-reporting, of course, that they're abstinent, so they don't actually go out and perform a drug test. So there's some room for error in that measurement. And that's one of the problems that we have, even as we try to track success rates, is we can only contact the people that want to stay in contact with us. So when people fall off the radar, that's obviously going to affect our ability to track. But kind of the question I have is what's most important in your opinion, as far as when parents or loved ones are looking for substance abuse treatment centers for their loved ones? What questions should they ask? What should they know before they go into that process, as far as what am I likely to hear and what does it actually mean?
When shopping around for a place to send a loved one to, this kind of comes from first show. If they are trying to sell you a goal of sobriety, just strictly sobriety, we want to get your loved one sober. You obviously want to inquire on how they go about doing that. Now, most of the places that are able to accept insurance and are big named they are actually basically given protocol on how that needs to be accomplished. That's approved in the country, and a lot of that is 12-step based. 12-step based philosophy. And if you listen to a gentleman by the name of Lance Dodds, who is very critical of this, not a Christian psychiatrist, does a lot of reporting on this, has written a book called Debunking. Debunking?
I don't remember the name.
I don't know. It's about debunking the 12 steps and its effectiveness. he makes this point. You don't. We'll get you the name of the book here in a minute, but he makes this point in it that so what you end up doing is that you have a protocol of how this is going to get done. How are we going to accomplish sobriety? We have to use this. So then you get all these places in order to attract people. They add all kinds of non-scientific based therapies in order to just kind of make it more attractive for someone to go to.
That book that Jim mentioned, and I'll link it in the show notes as well, but it's called The Sober Truth, Debunking the Bad Science Behind 12-Step Programs and the Rehab Industry. It's available on Amazon or wherever you want to buy your books.
There's also like a 5-minute NPR interview you can listen to that's very informative. In like 5 minutes, you get the gist of what this guy's talking about. It's pretty powerful. So when a person's looking for a place to send a loved one, you know, just kind of like my own opinion, be careful if someone's trying to send you basically a summer camp, you know, or a spa of some kind, because that's what a lot of these places have turned into. It's like, hey, look, we're going to give you the best therapy. We got a counselor on staff, but look at all these amenities that they're going to be able to. I mean, he talks about, Lance Does talks about, you know, things like horse therapy and ocean therapy, where, you know, they basically form a therapy around taking people out on a boat, you know. But anyway, I want to make a comment on just using the Betty Ford's number, what Todd just said. This is something I also tell people, and I think anybody that's in the industry would agree with me. If someone's giving you like a really high success rate, that should be a red flag right away. Would you say 80?
Between 85 and 95%.
85 and 95%. Now, I'm way more suspicious of things like this than my friend Todd here is. And we discussed a little bit before the show on how they come up with that number. So let's just kind of paint a picture, because you got to understand that this is the kind of, they need to produce numbers so they can continue to qualify for funding and whatnot, and be a place to attract more people. These numbers are very suspicious, because you would wonder why, if they have such a high success rate, why that has now not been adopted across the board, exactly what they do. But you still have all these individual places doing different things. So anyway, this is how a lot of places come up with numbers like that. I actually visited a place here in North Carolina, the premier secular place here in North Carolina. I won't mention the name. Not here to try to disparage other places. But I was given a 3-hour tour of the place, and I asked the success question on my tour. And I said, how do you measure success here? And what is your success rate? He said, it's very high. I said, do you have a percentage? He said, no, I don't have a number for you. I said, well, how do you measure it? He said, well, we are required to report to the insurance companies while the individual is with us how they are doing, and that's how we determine our success rate. So get that, this place costs upwards of $20,000 to stay at for 28 days. And while the individual is with them, their insurance companies are required to get reporting. That number they're reporting, yes, they're here, yes, they're participating, yes, that becomes part of their success percentage. I asked him, do you check in with them after they leave? He said, no, but we have a very dynamic alumni group that a lot of guys come to. You should come to see it. That's how they answered me. If you want, like I said, if you want to stay at this place, it's upwards of $20,000 for 28 days. The numbers that Todd gave, now he said that they checked 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. So how is it they could come up with 80%? So again, one of the big things, like Todd said, self-reporting. These are all, you call somebody up. How are you doing? Are you using drugs? Are you using alcohol? No. So they become a positive in the success percentage. Also, this is where we maybe disagree a little bit. There's no way of knowing that these numbers are based off of the amount of people that came through their front door. This is what I mean. Let's say you had 100 people come into the Betty Ford clinic, and they're checking with people 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean they're checking with all 100 people that came through and left for those numbers. They could have identified 10 people to do this to do this reporting on. So you're only really checking with a small percentage of the amount of people that came through, and they manipulate things like this again in order to get high success rate numbers. And this is all because people want to answer the question of success based on, are they continuing to use substance, are they abstinent or not? That's the number they're trying to come up with in order to tell people that we have a high success of people that are continuing in their abstinence. There's a lot of manipulation that gets involved in the numbers. Let me tell you another way of doing it. I mean, I knew a place that was extremely expensive. It was like $40,000 to go for a month in Florida. This is how they got their. I mean, imagine the amenities you're getting for $40,000 a month. The way they came up with their high success rate was they called individuals 1 week after they left and self-reporting, and they had an upwards of high 70s, low 80s success rate too. But then they never talked to them again after that. That was it.
Well, and then you would also say, I think, in addition to them just reporting against a zero-sum game, you're either abstinent or you're not. You're, in addition to that, you've got funding that's tied to that as well. So that kind of makes people have maybe not as pure motives as they probably would have otherwise. So if that's the case, then if you can't really trust a lot of these facts and figures that you might hear or that you might read on a website, well, then what are you to do? How do you assess whether it's going to be a good program or not? What is a successful program?
Okay, so this is when things get very specific in where I see myself operating within this world. So I like to try to basically tell people, the way that I view success. My view of success is not necessarily based on abstinence. Okay, so we are not trying to report a number to people of this many people are continuing on abstinence that finish our program. Let me quick just side note. I did this recently. I went through 270 something records on my own.
I think 286.
286 records on my own here at Freedom Farm to come up with a success. See if I could come up with a positive success rate, and I came up with something I could confidently say that 86% of our guys are successful. Now, that would be great news to hear, right? I mean, people will be like, wow, 86%. So this is how I came up with that number. My basis of success was not that, did I know that these people were completely abstinent, continuing on in complete abstinence, or they had not had any kind of a relapse since they left the program. No, it was, am I still in touch with them? Are they living what seems to be a life of they're a productive member of society? Are they actively working? Are they actively fellowshipping with other believers, attending church, and these types of things? So 86% of the people that completed our program, which is a one-year program, fit into that category. But here's the number that makes it all show you how easy it is to manipulate. Only 12% of the men that came into Freedom Farm actually finished the full one-year commitment. So that 86% percentage of guys that were under my definition of success that made up the 86 was only 12% of the people that had entered the program. It was only based on 12%. So, but another encouraging number that I came up with, that 50%, it was 51% of the men that left prematurely, I could honestly say that their lives looked completely different than when they first when I first met them and they first came into the program. So success for me, okay, number one, that I know that everybody that comes into Freedom Farm is going to be spiritually diagnosed. They're going to be asked questions that are going to give us a great idea of where they are with who they are in God's eyes, what that means on a daily basis. And I'm going to tell you that 9.5 out of 10 guys that come in here, they do not know how they stand before a holy God. They know about Jesus. They know about him dying on the cross, but they don't know how all of that applies to their lives, even men that have gone to church for a majority of their lives. So within the first month, we are having conversations that are clearing up things like that. While men are with us, we are continuing to give them information and materials and point them to how the answers to those very questions: who is this holy God? What do I, on my own, standing before this holy God, what does that look like? And how is that relationship prepared through Jesus Christ? What is that, after we've solidified that with an individual, what does that mean for me on a daily basis? That is the continued work that goes on here at Freedom Farm while the men are with us for a 12-month period. I think that is a good basis. If someone calls me and says, how successful you are, I'm going to say, well, I'm very successful at doing this with men that come here.
So then, from what that tells me, just sitting here listening to that, and from the conversations we've had in the past, it sounds, and some of the research that I did and stuff actually pointed to this as well. If you're coming from a Christian background and you're wanting biblical treatment, there are maybe more important questions than what is the success rate of the alcohol or drug treatment program that you're sending your loved one to. Would you agree that maybe the question, does my son or daughter have a relationship with Jesus Christ, and is this place going to help that develop? Is that maybe a more important question than is this? I mean, obviously we want sobriety. That's the point of an addiction treatment program, is
right,
sobriety. But there are more important things in life than just sobriety.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are a Christian, you're watching this show, and you are needing to have answers for this question, those would be the ways that you actually spell out perfectly. That's how I would encourage people asking, what is this place going to do as far as my son or daughter's relationship with Jesus Christ? We are on the same page that he is the answer for life. He's given us everything we need for life and godliness through our knowledge of him, which is 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3. So are we going to be ministering to our loved ones with that as a basis of our goals on a daily while we're with them? Are we going to be applying these truths to their lives and helping them apply these truths to their lives as they are moving through a program and life is happening and struggles are coming up, and we're able to talk about those individual things? So absolutely. So really, I mean, if you think about it, if you are sending a loved one to learn how to live a Christ-centered life, a byproduct of that will be sobriety, right? Right. So you need to find places that are fully invested on how to help people learn to live a Christ-centered life. And you have to have faith that a byproduct of your loved one learning that will be a transformed life. But it's all reversed, really, within the industry of treatment.
You were talking about how if someone comes to Christ and they actually follow Christ, that Christ is going to take that addiction or that sin is going to get taken out of their life as part of the sanctification process. I mean, obviously, they've got to work at it. You know, there's no program on earth that can do it without the individual's participation. But would you, even with our program, I mean, like, we have people that relapse. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's not uncommon at all, unfortunately. But I would say too, we need to, as a culture, I think we need to have a little bit more grace with people. I mean, sure, we want abstinence from drugs and alcohol. That's great, but it's sin, and sin is not, I have sins. I don't struggle with drug and alcohol abuse, but I have other things that I struggle with, and so, the idea that I'm just one day that's just going to stop, is just unrealistic, I think. Yeah. Anything else before we close this out that you wanted to say?
Well, I wanted to give you a picture of success. I'm not going to mention his name, but a graduate of Freedom Farm called me yesterday morning. And he's been out of the program for 3 years now. And he has since gotten married, started his own business. He and his wife have purchased property. They've had an architect design a home. And it's very exciting. And every time I've spoken to him, he has been just an encouragement, because he is living a different life, a transformed life. He's very involved in his church, raises money for missions, just everything that you would hope for a guy that would come in here. But he called me because he needed to share something with me. And this is what happened was he called me first thing in the morning and said, look, it's been bothering me for some time now, but when I left Freedom Farm, I relapsed. And I actually had a real tough time with it. He said, I don't want to blame it on anything, but when I left Freedom Farm, I went from this fellowship that was just encouraging, and it was great to be around every day, and it made it easy to be living and have my mind the way it was. And when I left immediately, I didn't get plugged into a church. I didn't. He had gaga eyes for his now wife, and so he had a lot of attention on that. But he ended up going home, and at home, not plugged in with the pressures of a fiance and all that kind of stuff. He ended up relapsing, and it got bad real quick. Like it was like a week-long thing. He ended up going back home, confessing to some people at the church that he is now involved in. He has not had issues with it for the last couple years. So if I was tracking success rates based on abstinence, he would have been a negative, because he relapsed soon after coming out of the program. But in my opinion, that is 100% a success story. This guy actually went back to what got him here in the first place, and when he struggled with it again, he knew what he needed to do about that issue. And this kind of just to kind of piggyback on what Todd was saying, this is something I think is very important for guys. Guys come here for a specific problem, substance abuse. But we try to show them that because they struggle with sin on a daily basis, doesn't mean that the answer to their struggle is any different than the same answer to somebody like Todd that's never struggled with. You've never even drank anything.
No, I haven't.
I don't understand people like you. So, never even had a drink.
If you understood my childhood, you would understand somebody like
That's
me.
true. I do know a little bit about it, but that's another show, I guess. But yeah, so the answer for Todd's life is the same answer for the guy coming in here that's struggling with substance abuse. If it isn't Christ and what that means on a daily basis, then we're lost. But because we have a similar shared answer, someone like Todd can speak into the life of somebody that's struggling with the substance abuse that gets them here in the first place. So that is a big difference when you go to places that charge thousands upon thousands of dollars, and all they're focused on is this one thing, right?
Right.
That one thing, if you just want to focus in on that one thing, you're going to lose, because your problem isn't that one thing. It's something much more broad, you know.
Right. Yeah. In the parlance of biblical counselors, it's a heart issue. It's not your issue is a heart issue. It's not a behavior issue. Drinking and alcohol or whatever is a behavior that you choose to express. That's not the problem. That's the symptom of the problem.
But you know, our culture has totally driven it. I mean, it's not even. I mean, it's an actual mental illness. You know, it's
a medical diagnosis.
It's a medical diagnosis. It's a disease.
Right.
They even tried to prove it was genetic, but most people don't realize they've disproven that. It's been debunked. So anyway, I think that's all I have to say on the topic.
Okay. I would just remind you that if you want to go over to beyondsobriety.org, that's our website. You can sign up so that you get notified when we do these Facebook Lives, as well as when we post to our YouTube channel and when we post the new podcast episodes. We'll also be on all the podcasts, not quite yet, all the podcast platforms like Stitcher and iTunes and all that. It's coming probably within the next couple weeks, so we're not quite there yet, but it's on the way. And then you can always watch us on YouTube as well. There's links to that on the website as well. So check us out at beyondsobriety.org. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and we will see you next week.